Musical.
Amazing.
Good day, gents.
Yes.
There.
Hey, it's an even better day now.
Thank
So
you.
Mike just came back from a big European tour, right?
I did.
And you were tell us when was there a Bowie festival or something like that?
There's a
in
big Bowie
Glasgow?
festival. It's the biggest one in the world. It's the 10th
Tell us all
year
about it, man.
in Dublin, And there was a bunch of alumni, and we had a 60-piece symphony orchestra. And
Wow.
I did an arrangement of Aladdin Sane
Mm.
for orchestra and the alumni, and it was sort of the highlight of the show. And but 21 songs were orchestrated for this particular event, and it was fantastic. And
Who were the other alumni?
there was Gail Ann Dorsey on bass, and Sterling Campbell, and Jerry Leonard, and
Okay.
Mark Platty. So a lot of the bunch of us that are sort of still left and breathing, and
Was
and
Ballou there?
and then sorry again.
Adrian Ballou?
Adrian wasn't there, but then I went to London and played with another rock band, and there we had Earl Slick,
Yeah.
and we had Mark Platty and myself. Then I went to New York to do reimagined works of Pink Floyd with Judith Hill, who used to sing with Prince, and
Yeah.
who she sang with? Prince and Michael Jackson right before he died. She was supposed to do that last tour as a duet with him.
Mm.
Wow.
So
Goodness.
now I'm back, and then I played a cancer benefit 3 days ago in Orange County at Segerstrom Hall, and I'm here for a few days, and I'm off again in a few days. So I'm glad we got to have this time together.
Ah, so glad. Yeah, we're honored to have you with us and to be playing. That's it's incredible. And of course, we see the Aladdin Sane in the background. So I mean, just and it sounds like you're just constantly surrounded by the best of the best. So it's good life, right?
Turning 80 in a few months, it's the best it could be because
I
now.
can't believe that. I swear to God, I can't believe that. I want a vial of your blood next time I see you. Okay.
Rupert, this is just fucking AI. No worries. This is not.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
You get it now. And
AI
each each clone I make is stupider.
You'll be a cabinet member soon. Look out. I'm going to put you in charge of secrecy for the CIA chat rooms.
Yeah, I know. I need a few clones. I mean, I'm doing something wrong over here.
Anyway, I'm pretty happy because I'm all at the stage of my life only have to take the gigs I love. Because as growing up and putting my daughters through college and wife and 5 grandkids, I was having to do everything just to make ends meet. The only time I'd make a lot of money is I was on tour with Bowie, and that's history now. So I'm doing it other ways, and it's starting to finally pay off because musician life very hard, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that you guys got to work together because I mean this collaboration is incredible. We got to talk about Heroes Ukraine because it's just such a beautiful thing. And of course, you know, obviously both of you, if there's anything you can do to put your good name and good talent towards something, I'm sure you would. But why? How in particular did this happen?
You
So,
know,
yeah,
oh,
go
you
ahead.
could tell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no. Well, there was a little bit of a history
Yeah.
before I got to meet Mike. And the weird thing about it is, you know, this project did take longer than I wanted it to. But the crazy thing is three of the best things in it came together at the very, very tail end. Just when I'm like, okay, we're pretty much done. Let's just finish it up. And then suddenly I met Mike. I met Olga, the guitarist, the long blonde lady who plays the electric guitarist, and Claire, who's the lady who's on the streets in Kiev. She had recorded herself just in the studio and she refilmed herself on the street. So anyway, long story short, this is one of the good things that comes out of Bumble. I think it's the only good thing that comes out of Bumble. So I think I told you this, Mike, right? So I went on a date with a girl who basically said in her bio that she was the world's biggest Bowie fan. I'm like, no, you're not. I am. So it was on, right? So our very first date, we had dinner and then went to a concert. We went to go and see Two Door Cinema Club, right?
Hmm.
And at dinner, we were talking about Bowie, and I was talking about Aladdin Sane and the piano. And she goes, oh, well, Mike, that's Mike. And I figured Mike was an English guy who was like part of that whole world. She goes, no, he lives in LA and he does these jazz piano clubs like every 2 weeks. Like, what? She goes, yeah. He's like, hang on a second. Oh, like a week from now, he's doing what? Anyway, I couldn't believe it. And anyway, so I booked a ticket. A week later, the girl and I had already like gone our separate ways. God bless her. So I came to see it without Mike knowing that I was going to be there, and I came with my son. And I'm like, okay, I just got to go up to him and ask him and seize the moment. And something of which I am terrible at, by the way, but I'm trying to train myself to be better. And so I went just right up after him. And I said, you don't know who I am, but this is what I'm doing. And he goes, oh, no, I know who you are. And because I co-wrote the music for Stigmata with Billy Corrigan.
Yes.
And I'm like, duh. Even though his name is in the credits, I barely met Billy. And I don't think I'd met Mike there at all. And Mike, were you there when there was one time I met Billy? We came to a small studio in West Los Angeles, and he just demoed some stuff. I don't know, maybe I don't remember that.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was the producer, myself, and the music supervisor.
Right.
And we came, and we'll tell you that story later, because that was like,
yes. Billy told me about it. I thank God
wasn't
there. But I know about it as if I was there, because he's crazy motherfucker, and he says to me, Mike, there's this movie here, and I won't do it unless you do it, because I know nothing about movies, and I know you've done that before. I said, okay, I'll join you. He said, but listen, these guys, they're not going to see shit until we do these cues, and then they could come hear it, and if they don't like it, we'll just put it out as an ambient CD and fuck them. And if they like it, we'll do the movie. So I'm laughing, thinking he's going in there pretty antagonistic, but that was his, that was his way. And I'm thinking, poor Rupert, the guy just wants some music. Why didn't he just call me? I did the main theme and all that shit. Anyway, I looked at the screen and I start playing. When that end with the fucking birds flying around.
Melody. That was the best thing that came out of it.
And that was me. And Billy almost nixed it because he didn't understand that when I look at something, to see it. And we almost had a fist fight because he says he gets his version in the 18th track and I get it the first time, So we realized we had different creative processes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I mentioned this to Mike, and we had like a demo. We were kind of almost done, right? And I think we just laid in the guitar. And anyway, so I said, listen, we got a demo I can send to you. We met on a Saturday night. I remember because I went to a wedding, which was literally 200 yards from the jazz club. So I went there. So I that night or the next morning, I sent him, the demo. And he goes, listen, I'm got a few days that I'm on the road, but listen to it as soon as I can. I said, of course. Tuesday night, I get a text going, hey, I think I've done a version you might like. I'm like, what? And he texted it to me, and he'd like done the whole thing.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. I'm like, tears were coming down I couldn't believe it. And I was like texting back and go, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I'm like, well, can we film you doing it now? And he's like, yeah. Do you mind doing it at my house? Well, my stuff is like, do you mind? Well, yeah, we'd love to. And within about 3 days, boom, about 6 of us turned up with cameras, and we filmed Mike. He has the studio where he is now, right? And downstairs he has this gigantic concert grand in his living room. Okay, and his living room's amazing, 30-foot ceilings, the whole thing and everything. So we filmed him playing the music, but actually playing to playback of his own music. You see what I mean? Because we'd already got the bits cut in and out by then. And it was great. It was just amazing. It's so funny because so much creative stuff, is just like pulling teeth, and it never happens. And then what it does, it's like, oh, whatever. And sometimes things just happen, and it's so bizarre. Yeah. And you know what? A weird thing what it is, the less money's involved, oftentimes the quicker it goes. Because it's basically going to be a no or a yes. If it's yes, let's just do it. You know what I mean? Anyway. And but sort of rewinding a little bit, I had spent a lot of time in Russia doing sports movies.
Yes.
But when I say movies, sports promos, right? And without wishing to brag, basically in 2007, they were doing the Winter Olympic bid, and they decided they need to bring in American or European directors to try and appeal to the international audience rather than just using Russian directors. And there are, of course, many great Russian directors.
Mm-hmm.
But when the Russian directors were like trying to like sell Russia, they kind of fell back on the things that they loved about Russia rather than having an international perspective. You know, it's a bit like hiring an English director to shoot a British Olympic promo and everything's like Morris dancers and clogs and sipping tea. It's like, right? But not what we want to say, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so they started using American directors, and I happened to be one of the few guys who came in on that. And we did the Winter Olympic bid. We then did the University Games bid. Then we did the FIFA World Football bid. We did the FINA World Champions, Swimming Champion. I mean, every bid we did, we won. So Russia went from having 25 years of no sports events in Russia at all to a decade of sports. Anyway, that was that. So then when I was there, I would go to Ukraine quite a lot to like talk and meet and whatever. And you know, anyway, long story short, I had friends who are Ukrainian. It just always seemed to be like a pretty mellow thing. Do you know what I mean? Like I would have said until a month ago, kind of like Americans and Canadians. But that's, you know what I mean? Anyway, and so I was really hurt. I mean, I was prepping a movie that was supposed to shoot in Lviv, which is about Ukraine during World War II, kind of a Schindler's List story. So in Lviv, which is on the far, far western side of Ukraine, right? The very, very edge. I mean, it used to be Poland. That's how close it is, right? Anyway, so I was there, and then I was in Kyiv, and there was a war going on, but it was far away, and I was like, yeah, it's just like a border skirmish. It's like, it's just always going to be happening. And then, of course, it blew up. And it bugged me more than a lot of other things that should bug me. And so the first thing I wanted to do was try and do what I can do, which is, make music videos, right? Anyway, so the first thing I wanted to do was Give Peace a Chance by John Lennon, which is like, the obvious, and so a good friend of mine is Bud Carr, who's one of the top music supervisors for movies in that world, right? So he reached out to them, and in about a week they said, you know what, thank you very much, but we have our own thing planned, and we're planning to do our own thing. I'm like, okay, you can't fight with the John Lennon estate, right? So I was just lying around going, what else? And suddenly I'm like, Heroes. And Heroes is so much better. Because, I mean, God bless him, John Lennon is a genius, but like, Give Peace a Chance feels like it was written more by Yoko Ono than it's like a bar song. If you strip out, it's like, oh, we are say, it's like a rugby song in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, God bless it. Heroes is like a completely different version. So Bud started asking permission, and it is kind of one of the crown jewels of the Bowie, catalog, right? So it did take a while, and they needed to know that it was going to be handled right, and there were a lot of guardrails there. So we tweaked the dialogue ever so slightly. I mean, one of the things about it is kind of like heroin despair chic, the original. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're all going to die. There's no hope. Everything's miserable. You know what I mean? It's like, cool, man. And which is wonderful, right? Because the music is saying the opposite to that by the end. Do you know what I mean? But this we wanted to be a bit more of a protest song. So we got permission to tweak the lyrics a little bit. We sent them that, and then we started, collecting these. And it did take a little bit longer than we'd hoped. But the idea was we worked with a foundation called the Ukrainian World Congress, which basically sort of represents Ukrainians around the world in about 60 different countries, about 20 million Ukrainians, I think. And they have an initiative called unitewithukraine.com. So that is the fundraising arm. And so we hitched our wagon with them. And so if you want to make a donation, you go to
Yes.
uniteukraine.com/heroes. That's our page.
Perfect.
Anyway, and so they brought in two other really fantastic Ukrainian foundations. One is actually, I think, originally Canadian, but it's called Saint Javelin, and they
Mhm.
create great merch, and all 100% of that money goes straight to Ukraine. And there's another one which is very Ukrainian called Come Back Alive, which has about 4 million followers on Facebook.
Mhm.
Anyway, so all those three came together, and so we worked with them, and we have some amazing Ukrainian female singers, some of the very, very best in Ukraine. We have Claire, who is the one who's singing
Yes.
in Kiev. We have Mika Newton, who's currently living in Los Angeles. She's taking care of her sister's child. Her sister is in the army, and her brother-in-law is in the army. So it's Mika Newton and Claire are kind of like the main singers. Then we have the famous rapper Alyona and
Mhm.
Jerry Heil and Cola kind of doing their own little side bit. We have some footage from Daka Braka, which is like the most sort of like iconic sort of like jazz, funk, I think they call it ethno chaos. Very, very unique kind of band. We filmed them a couple of times. We have a little bit of them. And then Mr. Mike Garson,
Yes.
beautiful piano to lead us in and take us all the way through and then wrap it up. So just like really bringing everything together in an extraordinary way, musically, but also kind of the legacy of Bowie.
Hmm.
It's
It was
fantastic. It's fantastic.
So I was going to ask you, Mike, what it was like to, because to bring up these songs again and to think about David again, and all that. I mean, it's got to be a beautiful thing, but can it be done this way? But probably just a flood of memories, right?
Well, it's been that way from the day he passed
Yeah.
because I had an alumni band that toured prior to COVID. We did at least 100 concerts with 50 different singers from Sting to Seal, Evan Rachel Wood, is just on and on, Boy George. I did many things. So he's always in my mind. And I just came from Dublin and it was a Bowie thing. So it's been a very slow grieving process. And somebody in one of the interviews, I think last week, 2 weeks ago, said, "What do you miss? What would you like to do most if he was here?" And the answer came instantly. It's like tour. I'd want to be touring with him,
Yeah.
even more than making the records.
Hmm.
David
Yeah.
enjoy touring?
Say again?
Did David enjoy touring?
Up until the last 2 weeks of every tour.
Yeah.
And then he was done. He was fucking out there and through, and he's on the next project, and that wasn't fun hanging with that. But he moved so fast. That's how it always was with him. I mean, I actually played with 12 different bands with him between 1972 and 2005.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I saw one of those shows, which is where I met Bowie, and this was in New Jersey it was with a Blue Man Group and Carl Cox, and it was this wild array of people, Ash. So yeah,
Oh, I remember that show. That was great. Yeah.
yeah, and that's where I met him. He had locked himself out of his dressing room, and the security was running around frantically trying to figure out, how to get him back in, and he and and he's and they were apologizing to him. He said, "Why are you apologizing to me? I did this to myself." And he's just sweet and graceful, and sat there and talked to me on a road case for a while, and for no good reason. I had no idea who I was, and I just thought that was great.
That's who he is actually, and who he was. And you know, you can't create such great music and not be a good person. You can do sometimes bad things, who doesn't? But he had a good heart.
Yeah,
I was on
absolutely.
television in Dublin, and the guy said to me, "What's your best memory with David?" And you'd think I would say playing Heroes or Life on Mars or Space Oddity or songs I co-wrote with him on the Outside album. And it was, my dad passed away in the mid 90s, and the band was heading off to Finland, and we were in New York. I went to the funeral. They were rehearsing without me. I got there 2 in the afternoon, and he walked over me and he embraced me in such a loving way that it helped me get through that grief. And then we were off on tour, and that has nothing to do with music. That's a human being. A
Yeah.
very fucking talented human being, but
Yeah.
a human being. You know, in 500 years, you know, because I've done maybe 2,000 interviews, one of the things that's common is he was the best casting director ever, because every musician he worked with was always the perfect person at the perfect time, whether it was Carlos Alomar, Mick Ronson, whoever. And then secondly, what was the second that he was the best at? I'll get the second in a minute, but that's who the guy is, you know. And I miss those shows. I mean, I must have done 400 or 500 shows with him in 20 albums. You don't realize it because I was only hired for 8 weeks, so
Yeah.
it was meant to be, because our creative processes were similar. We both kind of just were loose cannons. When we felt something, we did it, you know, and we both were able to get tracks done in 1 or 2 takes, as opposed to artists who just drag on and on. We'd be recording an album, and he's not even in the studio, and 3 in the afternoon he walks in, he said, okay, turn up the track, 1 take, walks out of the studio, and it's done.
Wow.
And we
That's incredible.
continue working.
Hmm.
So it was a
So,
great experience, you know.
yeah. So for this version of Heroes, what did you do differently here than you would have done, say, on the road?
On the original recording, there's not a piano.
Yeah.
There's it's Robert Fripp Trip,
Yeah.
that album, but there's probably Brian Eno or somebody doing in the background. I mean, there's fucking 5,000 layers. I've seen each track. You don't want to see that. It sounds like shit. Put all together in one, it's fantastic. So when we started doing live, either I don't play or David says, play whatever you want. So it was different every night. So when Rupert came to me, what am I going to do? There was an excellent piano part on there by the producer, right, Rupert?
Yeah, we had a great Ukrainian music producer called Konstantin Suhanov. I'll get you the spelling of that properly for your thing.
But
Kostya.
he was
He's a
great.
keyboard player in a band originally, so that's sort of like, you know, how he approached everything.
And I don't like to step on another person's creations, you know, but I knew that for the value of the Ukrainian concept that we were going for, it would be helpful to have me connected with it, just even if it's a little bit of cloud or something, or the person that was so close to David, he considered me a friend, you know what I mean? His band was his second family because we're on the bus all the time, you know? So
The other
I
thing about
was
it,
able to create a
sorry,
new
yeah,
piano part, right? I mean,
yeah,
I took the vibe and then I just went from, is that what I did? Rupert, I don't
yeah,
remember
totally,
exactly.
absolutely, yeah. You literally, you sent me a demo. Like, I mean, I met you on Saturday, and on Tuesday you sent me the thing,
That I remember.
and it barely changed from there.
Yeah, yeah.
Barely at all.
I mean,
Yeah,
when I recorded live, there were new improvs, but I was trying to keep that drive because
right.
now it was going to be piano driven. So already now it's a new version, Paul.
Exactly.
So therefore, that makes it fresh. The new lyrics make it fresh. And by the way, I think the guy who runs the Bowie estate is the same one who runs the John Lennon estate.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah, I think
Interesting.
so.
Hmm.
Huh. That's
That's
interesting.
Well, you know what I was thinking about when I heard this, and seeing the kids' faces in there as well. I was thinking there's probably a whole lot of kids that can, maybe discovering the song for the first time or discovering both of your work for the first time. And it's so cool to think about influencing the next generation. And we talk about that on the show sometimes. What kind of advice do each of you give to somebody that wants to follow in your footsteps? Because you both have different paths, but both wonderfully creative and fantastic paths.
Well, having children, and my daughter was on stage when I'm at Wembley with Bowie in '73 at 2 years old. Now she's 53. So
Mm,
she's been a fan. Her daughters are 14 and 18. They know Bowie. I do concerts. One of the last concerts on the reality tour in 2004, there was this little girl who was in the front row. David brings her up on stage. And that was a moment. I'm playing at the gig, my residency in LA, where Rupert met me at the Sunrose in the Pendry Hotel. This gorgeous model who's like 18 or 20 shows up. Do you remember me? How do I remember you? I've been married 57 years. I wouldn't remember you. so she said I was the person who David brought up on the stage. And I said, oh my
wow.
God.
Mm,
So it is passing through,
yeah.
And now I have a little great grandnephew, or granddaughter, I think. And we sent a little Bowie t shirt that we had
Yeah.
for a 6-month-old. So, yes,
Oh,
it's passing on, no question about it. See, the thing about Bowie, now I remember the second thing, he is the Renaissance guy. He's the
Hmm.
Michelangelo, he's the Da Vinci of that century and into this century. That's very, very different than a great rock band.
Oh yeah.
It's very, very different. I've played with a lot of great rock artists. I've worked with Joe Elliott, and I've worked with
Yeah.
Duran Duran, and I've worked with St. Vincent, and Boy George, everybody through my life, and Mel Torme back in the day, and Martha
Yeah.
Reeves from Martha and their Vandellas, and it just goes on. No one has been like David, because he was not just a composer, not just a songwriter, not just a producer. He was fashion. He was a editor for an art magazine, and his
Hmm.
acting was phenomenal. Had he not hated L.A., he would have been winning Oscars because he's deep. So,
right.
and
Man
other
who
things
felt the
that we
work.
don't know about. And do you see this picture here?
Yeah.
Can you
Oh
see
yeah.
that?
Mm, yeah.
He he did that of me while I was recording
Oh wow.
in charcoals
Oh, really?
in
Amazing.
Montreux in Switzerland. And our
Mm.
house burned down 6 years ago in the
Oh.
fires. And I lost my three pianos, my studio, my whole house. The only thing I ran out of the house with was that.
Oh wow. My goodness. Hmm. That's
So
incredible.
he was an artist too, and he did installations and crazy shit and many other things, and a great dad,
Yeah.
and a great husband. And when I joined him, I was just a piano player supporting some guy who was a rock guy who I never heard of. It was that simple.
Yeah. So what do you tell those kids that want to play music? What kind of advice do you give them?
The basic advice is if you love something or anything, stick with it. Whether it's a harp, a guitar, a vocal, a piano, medicine, AI, robots, coding. Because as a piano teacher, I've had over 10,000 students since 1963. And in the early days, I taught piano, classical and jazz. And one fine day, 30, 40 years later, not everybody wants to play. So someone comes to my house and I don't see the enthusiasm. I said, what do you really want to do? The guy says, I want to be a doctor. I said, go
Mm.
ahead. So I got the result. I want for the student what's best for their highest good. Initially, I didn't know that, so I just taught piano. So, so my advice is your passion. I don't give a fuck if they play the piano. I take up so much space with the piano that my wife gave it up, my daughters gave it up, anyone who's around me, students run away because of my playing, and that's no good. That's not a great result. So I want them to be happy. If they really love the piano, and I have students like that, I will teach them. I've had students. I got one guy who's been studying with me 45 years, but he only comes now once a year. But for years, because I taught him everything I know. This guy only wants to play. He's out of his fucking mind. He only wants to play blues in C or G that sound like this. I taught him every fucking lick I know. Took me 10 years. His head is so stupid. But he's very good at that. And that's all he does. Two keys, and he's happy.
Right. Yeah. Love that. What would you say, Rupert, to that? Because you have such an eye, and you for years you've directed the great music videos, great films, and I know people want to do that, but it's hard.
It is hard, but you know what? It's never been easier than now. There's a great documentary about Coppola called, was it not Burden of Dreams? That's the one. This is about when he made Apocalypse Now, and his wife made it. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, and obviously Apocalypse Now was like, the making of it was just, it broke him, whatever, and finally it was done, and everyone said it's a mess, and then of course it's a big classic. But when he was being interviewed, he's basically looking at the camera and saying, it's not always going to be like this. One day there'll be like, there's a thing called like the VHS camcorder, and like one day there's like some little girl from Pittsburgh is going to pick that up and run out on the streets and just make her own film. And he's kind of clearly reacting to like the overwhelming, like classical filmmaking that he's just been stuck in. Right. And so now, like, I do a lot of, commercial projects as well, right? And anytime you give a budget to a client, it's always too much, right? And you're going to be X, and they go, oh, does it have to be that much? I said, you could do it for free. And I'll pick up my phone and I'll hand it to them and go, here, go out and shoot it yourself. Just give this back to me tomorrow or whatever. But go on, just shoot it yourself. It's fine. I'm like, no. But that's the most amazing thing. And I mean, like the two movies that won most of the awards, certainly the biggest awards in the Academy Awards this year, were the Nora, of course, and the Architect movie, The Brutalist.
Brutalist, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're probably lying about their budget, but I think Anora was about 6 million, and I think The Brutalist was 10-ish, plus minus. So, for less than $15 million, they scooped probably 11 Oscars or something. Mm-hmm. So the means of, and so like the guy who made Anora, his first film he made here in Hollywood, just wandering around with an iPhone, literally, like no lights, nothing. So you can do that right now. And that's what's amazing. So it's completely democratic, you know what I mean? And then you can edit it. I'll give you a small example, okay? This kind of blew my mind. So back when I had money, he says grandly, but we were on a family holiday, right, with the kids.
Yes.
And we were going through London, and it was my daughter's birthday, right? So we always, the summer, it's in the summer, right? And I wanted to put them up at the Ritz. Right, one time. Trust me, this is not a habit. Normally it's the Motel 6. Not even the Motel 6, the Motel 5. But anyway, we stayed for 1 or 2 nights, all of us in one room, the 2 boys and me and Maya. And then, so we went to the Ritz, we checked in, then we went and had her birthday dinner, and then we came back. And she was like, as we were getting in the elevator, she's like, hey, boys, stand over here. Hey, boys, go do that. Hey, boys, do this. I'm like, what's she doing? And as we sat down, like 10 minutes after we'd walked into our room, she played me on her phone like a little 45-second video, all cut to Put It on the Ritz, of us, stills, video, you name it, that she just edited on her phone, pulling down the music and doing. I'm like, oh my God. I think she was like 8 at the time or 10. Anyway, so there's no barrier to entry any longer on that stuff. There's no excuse.
When you think about Francis and his perception of the future and seeing it, Bowie in the 90s called me one day And he said, there's this thing called the internet. You know what it is? I said, well, I've
Mm.
heard about it. He said, this is the future, Mike. And I'm saying, David, can we talk about the song we're recording tomorrow? He said, no, Mike, it's about the computers and the future and where this is going. So again, kind of prophetic in his knowing this before there was anything. There was nothing.
Right.
There was internet with the army, and they were
Right.
ahead
Right.
18
Right.
years, but
Up
no
and down.
more. So there these kind of artists like Francis or David. They see things where
Mhm.
it's going.
They're very tech savvy as well as creative, right? They're
Yeah.
not like, oh, what's going on? Let's make it blue. You know what I mean? They're like way ahead technologically.
Way ahead. And we did crazy stuff. On Diamond Dog's album, he used cut up techniques from William Burroughs with songs
Oh,
you
wow.
probably know. But when we were doing Earthling and Hours in Reality album, there was now a program that did it for him.
Right.
But it was specifically devised for him, so it was a little shape, but it's just faster. And then he'd still modify it. But he was using it with the newest tool. So the newest tool now, if he was alive, would be ChatGPT, and he'd be doing something there. And that's how it goes. These things are just tools. You use them, whether it's an iPhone, you could use it for harm. You could smash someone in the face with the iPhone, or you could call your mother, and you could blow up the planet with AI, or you could, help somebody who's dying of cancer and put all the data in. I turned on one of my students who's a doctor, and he does Zoom lessons with me in Alabama, and I turned him on to ChatGPT, the $20 version, or I have the $200
Yeah.
version. I turned him on to it. He saved two patients' life in emergency in the last month because he
Wow.
was able to collect all the data so much faster than him searching it. So
Mhm.
that's a good use. I could tell you the
Yes.
bad uses, and you could tell me, but that's not where I live. So leave that to others. I just want to make music, and if I'm using a tool, the piano is my tool. But I also use ChatGPT in ways that help me create whatever it is. I've just done a book with it, and I've written
Yeah.
500, did 500 poems with it this last year. So just because I got bored with the piano, and then I'll be back at the piano, and then I'm playing a jazz group, then I'm doing a thing with Rupert, for Ukraine, and then I'm,
Let's
going
bring
to
it back to
Florida.
Ukraine. Let's bring it back to Ukraine for a little bit, just for a
Sure.
second, readers.
Yeah.
Now, because I'd also like to throw it back to Mike in a second to end up
Yeah.
some great piano stuff. But it is so important. Like one of the things, classically in newspapers, it was always, if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yes.
So whenever there's a war, nobody goes, oh, most of Ukraine didn't get bombed last night, right?
Yeah.
We talk about where the bombs did fall. So we get basically focused on seeing the disaster of a country and not seeing the 99.9999% of the people who didn't get killed, who didn't get injured, who are in danger of it, and who are trying to protect their fellow Ukrainians and also trying to live an ordinary life the best that they can,
Mhm.
right? Because obviously there's the front line, there's bombs falling everywhere, but people are still growing up and trying to fall in love and listen to great music, and they're trying to do all of those things which are a core part of being alive. And if you beat that out of them, right, then you've really won the war. And Ukraine is very, very strong people, a lot of backbone, a lot of, Russia's been trying to get rid of the idea of Ukraine for 300-400 years, right?
Mhm.
It's not news to them, right? So anyway, so it's really important to both Mike and I to honor the artists who are the singers and the guitarist and doing some of the percussion in this, to shine a light on the fact that artists are still trying to create, albeit in insufferable situations. And all of these ladies are doing an incredible amount, to raise money and draw attention. And Alyona has her own foundation. If your audience knows the Eurovision Song Contest, which obviously is much more popular
Yeah.
now than it was, years ago, Alyona and Jerry Heil were the Eurovision Song Contest people for Ukraine 2 years ago or a year ago.
Mhm.
And Daka Braka also. So, there's a lot of people who have gotten, I said, maybe European familiarity. But Daka Braka is a big college band. they taught all the college, you know, medium-sized things. You know, they were up in Santa Barbara, they were down here in LA, they were at the Greek. You know what I mean? They're always on the road, and it's a very unique sound.
Let me ask you this. I wanted to ask you because it pains me sometimes when I watch that video. I had the same feeling when I watched Black Star and when that music came up.
Yeah.
You know, it's a different thing, but that same emotion. And the question I was in my mind is, had this come out a year or two ago, would have it had a more powerful effect? Are we dealing with the politics crossing into it now, making some people gun shy? Because I asked a few people to play it who had a lot of power positions, and they said the situation was too hot now for them to do about it. You know, you could call it cowardice or you could call it whatever you want. It's just been on my mind, and I'm trying to figure out how to turn the lemon into lemonades. What are your thoughts, Rupert?
My thoughts are that when the election was won by the current administration in November, my first thought was there's a big danger that they will cut funding, military funding to Ukraine. This song, the most use this song can be is to be like an earworm to as many people on the Hill as possible. And then, of course, you know, come January in the inauguration, all sorts of other things came up. And so, you know, in a way, I was kind of thinking, oh, it's going to go away. I mean, he says he's going to solve it in 24 hours, right? You know, our president. And that clearly, you know, didn't happen. But I mean, just literally last night, there was a drone or a bomb that fell on a children's hospital again, just yesterday. You know what I mean? I mean, like, what are you supposed to be doing? Like, what are you supposed to be telling Ukraine? Like, I'm going to bomb your children's hospitals until you love us? Is that theory? Like, this is going to make Ukraine want to be part of Russia, for Christ's sake? I mean, it's nuts, right? It's just punishment of everybody in Ukraine for being a country. And by the way, just remember, Russia has acknowledged Ukraine being a separate country many times. They always go, well, it's really Ukraine. Oh, really? Why did you sign the Budapest Memorandum in 1994 when Ukraine gave up the third largest nuclear stockpile in the world was in Ukraine? And Russia and America said, Cold War's over. You don't need the nukes. Give them to us, and we'll take care of them. And Ukraine goes, not so fast, buddy. Slow down. What do we get in return? So England, America, Russia, and later on France and China signed a thing called the Budapest Memorandum in 94 so that Ukraine would give up all of its nuclear weapons. And in return, those 5 countries would guarantee the territorial integrity of Ukraine in 1994. It was signed by Clinton. It was signed by Yeltsin. It was signed by whoever was the president of Ukraine then. I can't remember his name. You know what I mean? And as a matter of fact, it was so knife edge, right? Clinton was on his way in Air Force One to Moscow to meet with Yeltsin on something. Okay, it was towards the end of the year. And they found out that the Ukrainian president was like, gee, I don't know if he was just getting ready to sign it. And he's like, I don't know. It's like this, we've got the bargaining chip. We're giving it away for free. Clinton diverted Air Force One, landed in Kyiv on his way to Moscow, and sat with the president of Ukraine, explaining to him why this was so important and why the guarantees were real. And so 2 days later, the president of Ukraine did sign over all of the nuclear weapons in Ukraine. They didn't have the codes, right? But turns out there's a hacker or two in Ukraine, I've heard, you know? They didn't have the codes, but they gave them up in terms of a treaty, a guarantee, which has now been ripped up and thrown in their face. So what does that say to every other country who's trying to get nuclear weapons or is on the verge of it or already has it? What does that say to Pakistan? What does that say to North Korea? What does that say to any country that we wish they didn't have nuclear weapons? We're like, oh, we'll give you this if you give us that. Fuck you. Not going to happen. Look what happened to Ukraine in 1994. They gave up everything, and then they just got invaded.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, there's a whole knock-on effect. You know, sometimes people ask me, like, yeah, is it really important? He's like, Ukraine. I was talking to someone the other day, a guy who's traveled all over Europe, and he goes, didn't NATO kind of overstep a little bit? And I'm like, dude, have you heard of the Warsaw Pact? Okay, but the Warsaw Pact is the biggest euphemism of a name ever. There was no pact. Warsaw Pact is 7 countries who were invaded by Russia after 1945. Eastern Germany, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Albania, Romania, or Moldova. Those countries were happy to have come out of World War II and be non-aligned. They did not want to be under the Warsaw Pact. And they were under the heel of the Russian boot from 1945 till 1991. And if you doubt that, go and have a coffee somewhere in Budapest in an outdoor cafe and count the bullet holes in the walls all around from the Hungarian Revolution of 1959 when they rolled in with tanks. Or talk about the Prague Spring when the Czechoslovakian people were like, okay, we're done with this whole like Russian thing. Thank you. We're not part of the USSR. We don't want it. We don't have any of the benefits. We have all the negatives. God bless you. Boom. Fucking in came the tanks. Let me ask you one more thing. There were 15 members of the USSR in 1990. 15 members, Russia plus 14 others. As soon, the minute that every single one of those other states or republics, the minute they could buy their freedom from Moscow, they did. The second, right? It's like nobody wants to be under the Russian heel. The only country that might conceivably want that is Belarus.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know?
How do you know so much about history? You're a fucking director.
Well, the thing about it is that when I first went to Russia, I basically went there on a complete. I was invited to go there by a company that was making television commercials to support the bid to hold the Winter Olympics in Sochi. The Russians didn't have it yet. They were bidding against South Korea and Austria. And they decided, as well as doing the big presentation, they need to do a lead up, right? And so the big way you do this is you put ads on CNN International and BBC International. And anytime any voting member of the IOC is stuck in a hotel somewhere on the way to here, they turn on their TV and they see BBC International and CNN International. And you just dump ads there, right? So that ad ran ad nauseum. I wrote this commercial called Russia, the door is open, right? Always go with the big lie, you know? Anyway, and la-di-da. So I did that. So I worked with Dmitry Peskov, who is the right-hand man to Putin. I mean, I wanted a speech for Putin in English. It's on YouTube. Look it up. But that was when Russia was trending towards being, in its own way, a member of the free world. In its own way. We don't all have to do it the same way, right? Finland doesn't have to be Denmark. Slovenia doesn't have to be Wales, right? You can be part of the free world in your own way, right? Russia's a big, big country. It needs managing, right? So you got to do it in a different way. But the main problem is Putin had one term and a second term. Then he was termed out, right? And so Medvedev became the president. Medvedev was the prime minister. He became the president. Medvedev was the guy who traveled up and down Silicon Valley and was in Apple getting an iPhone. And I mean, he was like Mr. Tech new breed, right? And then everybody in Russia was like, okay, it was great having Putin. Boy, did he do a good job. And now we're on to a new blood. And then doof, it all got pulled back. And a lot of times I try to explain to friends of mine, especially English friends, Putin is in many ways the Margaret Thatcher of Russia, right? When he was there, he was kind of needed. Russia was pretty fragile state when he took over in 2000, right? It was falling apart at the seams. So you needed a strong man in the same way that when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of England, like we had the 3-day weeks, right? The lights would go off at 5 o'clock in the winter because there was no more coal. I mean, it was not pretty, right? And she kind of got England back in shape again. But when we didn't need that Iron Lady any longer, she got voted out and she went away, right? Churchill was the guy we needed in the war. The first election after the war, the people who loved him voted him out. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You can't look back on Winston Churchill and say that guy wasn't an amazing wartime prime minister, but in 45, when he gave the Iron Curtain speech, okay, he was no longer prime minister.
I didn't know that.
Anyway, so I started looking at, I started going back there more because every time we did a film, every time we did a bid for them, they won. And then it led up until
it has to be conflicting because you gave all that energy to Russia. Yeah.
Correct. But then, so it all, just so you understand, historically, it all went down the very tail end, the last night of the Winter Olympics, 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics, which everybody had been just raining on that parade, and they went great. And so the whole perspective had gone from like, oh, it's too expensive, it's going to be a disaster, to like, oh, who knew? It's fucking great. Everybody loved it. And I built a TV studio. I literally built a TV studio in Sochi for Fox Sports, Sky Brazil, and Sky New Zealand, right? We ran it 24 hours a day. And the last night of the Sochi Winter Olympics, I believe it was February the 24th, it might have been the 28th. Putin is sitting there watching the end games. It's a big celebration. And in his ear, he's being told that Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president, has been exfilled from Ukraine in a Russian military helicopter. They had to take him out. So that's what he was feeling, right? The moment of triumph met with my country that I fucking own at the guy's whatever. And the very next day, the little green men walked into Crimea. Russian soldiers with no insignia on. Anyway, we'll save this for part 7 of the series.
Yeah, there's so much to learn
Mike,
here.
Okay, enough of me. Mike, why don't you, just to play us out, play us some of your favorite melodies from your time with Mr. B.
You want a little medley, you mean?
Whatever, throw us whatever you feel like, maestro. That's my karaoke go-to.
I love it. was incredible. My
Unbelievable.
goodness.
Unbelievable, Mike.
Hmm,
What a joy. What
that
a
was
joy.
Does it,
No
amazing.
words. No words.
does it come through? Because I don't know about
Oh,
Zoom.
oh yeah,
It
it
comes
came
through.
through in a big way. Ah, that's amazing. I love it. Well, I love that you've both been able to use your talents to do so much good and bring us so many great memories, music, and visually, through for the years. And there's much more to come.
More to come.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rupert.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah, thank you both so much for being on with us. Thank you for the beautiful music at
Yeah.
the end, and look forward to talking to both of you again soon. We're going to tell everyone to check this out and support it. Thank you all so much.
Good to
Thank
see
you
you. Thanks,
so
Paul.
much.
Bye.
Take care.